Honda is recalling more than 2.5 million vehicles in the U.S. over a fuel pump issue. The recall notice says fuel pump failure could cause the engine to stall while driving, increasing the risk of a crash. The news comes a day after another recall. 1 million Toyota and Lexus vehicles were called over a potential airbag problem. And a week after Tesla announced, remember, an issue with the autopilot system in nearly all of its U.S. vehicles. Joining us now is Greg Migliore, Editor-in-Chief at Autoblog. Greg, it's great to see you. I want to get into these specific issues with you, Greg, but first kind of just a 30,000-foot view question, Greg. Are we seeing more recalls in the U.S. year in and year out now, or does it just feel like more recalls, Greg, because we pay that much more attention to them?
Hey, guys, great to be with you. There are more recalls, and I think that could actually be taken as a good thing. I think automakers are becoming increasingly proactive. It's much better to get out in front of the issue, sort of try to, help the customer out, tell them how they can remedy the issue and move forward. In this case, the Honda fix is pretty simple. They're just going to replace the fuel pump. It is a large number of vehicles because they sold a lot of cars. But basically, it should be a fairly simple fix. And it apparently only affects 1% of the population of the vehicles. But once you know the problem, you got to take care of it. So that's what we're seeing here.
I mean, again, Greg, hey, it's Julie here. It's good to see you. It feels kind of anecdotally like there have been a lot recently in particular, right? You got this Honda one, you had a Tesla one, there was a Toyota one. And usually, as you say, it's pretty easy to fix. In the case of many of the Tesla ones, it's an over-the-air update, right? Have the car makers changed the way that they approach these compared to how they did in the past?
I think many of them have decided that being upfront, honesty is the best policy. Be proactive. Try to, be an ally with the customer. Let them know that, hey, the car company that sold you the car stands behind it and that they want to fix it. Because, again, in many of these cases, it's a pretty simple fix. And in the case of Teslas, they can flash it and you're essentially good to go. But no two recalls are exactly alike. Some of them, perhaps sound a little like scarier because it could lead to a fire risk, even if that's perhaps pretty rare. Some of them are like relatively simple, more just like, again, like a fuel pump or something. We've seen all sorts of recalls. And I think, again, it's better when the automaker moves forward and it is proactive. I think Tesla, even though the fix is actually pretty simple, they have to recall almost every vehicle they've made going back to 2012. And they didn't really want to do that. Now, behind the scenes, probably a lot of automakers don't necessarily want to do it. But Tesla kind of dug in their heels a little bit before I think it was last week, they actually agreed to do it. So at the end of the day, the recall's out there, and I guess that's all that really matters.
And Greg, let me ask you this. So when we talk about Honda and Toyota, Greg, here in this context, you're talking about hardware issues, right? With Tesla, when we talk about a recall, we're talking about an over-the-air software update. And correct me if I'm wrong, Greg, you're the car guy, the car guru, but that sounds to me like a much cheaper, easier, faster fix. If you're a Tesla investor, you're listening to this news, you're listening to this segment, are you actually feeling maybe kind of relatively good about your position?
I think if you're a Tesla owner, you might be feeling pretty good for an over-the-air fix because that generally is quicker. Now, with any fix, a lot goes into it beyond what actually happens either, I guess, in cyberspace or at the dealership. Whether it's a hardware fix that does require somebody to, get their hands oily and fix things, or it's a software issue. Somebody does have to, recalibrate, rebuild, recode that software. So that can certainly be complicated behind the scenes as well. In the case of, Tesla, it's definitely a high leverage situation because you're talking about autopilot and auto steer, which, is definitely a big selling point for many of their customers.
Hey, Greg, Josh and I were talking ahead of the show, and we wanted to take advantage of your expertise since you're with us, since you are steeped in this stuff. We were talking a little bit about CarMax numbers before this and just talking about the outlook for 2024 for vehicle sales broadly. Give us a little vibe check here. I mean, like I said, you're steeped in this stuff. How's it feeling?
So it looks like car sales in the U.S. are going to be probably up just a tick. Looking at different analyst projections, I'm seeing anywhere from flat to like 2 to 3%. And I think that's reasonable. I think you're going to see perhaps some easing of inflation. It's going to be a little bit easier for consumers perhaps to get loans. We saw the Fed rate cut. I think that was last week. In general, I think the mood and the climate for buying cars is going to be better than we've seen the last few years. The seasonally adjusted selling rate, I think, is going to get closer to more like 16 million. It's been below that for the last couple of years with COVID, with inflation, the chip shortage. Most of that stuff is starting to kind of clear off, and I think you could see a healthier market in 2024.
All right, we'll see, and we'll check in with you, of course, periodically. Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
You too.